Well, I believe it's 7:02. We can get started. First, would like to say that this meeting is held in person and public while recognizing that a manager may, based on advice from a healthcare professional, have a legitimate reason for not attending the meeting in a public place in person, such as the COVID-19 exposure or infection, and in such circumstances may participate in the meeting remotely. So after having called the meeting to order, first thing would be the roll call. Mr. Smith.
Manager Crafton.
Present.
Manager Duval.
Present.
Manager Cook.
Present.
Manager Ziegler.
Present.
President Pedersen.
Present.
All managers are present.
Next on the agenda is, of course, the approval of the agenda. Because we have a very long agenda this evening, I am again asking for all of us to try to respect the 10 minutes per manager limit per item with a 2-minute rebuttal. And we're going to try to work at being done by 10:30. So let's everybody try very hard to do that if we can. Next, I would take a motion to approve the agenda.
I'd like to move to approve the agenda as written. Second.
Thank you, Manager Ziegler and Duval. Does anybody
Madam
have
President.
any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam President,
Yes.
I'd like to remove items E and F and put those in the, remove them from the consent agenda.
All right. They'll be moved to new business, item A.
Thank you.
Great. Next, welcome to the board meeting.
Wait. We need to vote.
Oh, yes, excuse me, just going flitting right past that. So let's move on the motion to approve the agenda.
Manager Crafton.
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook.
Yes,
Manager Ziegler.
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, now to the matters of public interest. So is there anyone who would like to address the board? If you would, you'll be acknowledged by me. Please raise your hand. If you have an app, raise that online. Wait to be recognized. Please state your name and address for the record. And please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Additional comments may be submitted to us in writing. Generally, we will not take official action on items discussed at this time, but we would refer the matter to the staff for a future report or direct the matter be scheduled for a future agenda. So is there anyone here that would like to speak?
If you could come to the podium, I have a mic here for you.
Right.
As the green light's on, you're fine.
Okay. My name is Tom Lindquist. I live on the east side of Duck Lake at 16750 Baywood Terrace. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My time right now will be quite short. I want to speak just a little bit to kind of extend what I said a month ago at the February 7th, I think it was, meeting. I was in support, and most of the people in our Duck Lake Homeowners Association are strongly in support of Resolution 24-017, which is intended to approve the task order number 46 to analyze the effect of potential modifications to the outlet. We strongly favor changes that will bring the average water level of Duck Lake back to where it historically was pretty much from 1970 until the outlet was modified. When the outlet was modified in 2014, the actual average water level turned out to be about a foot lower than it used to be. So we're concerned about the effect of this on winter kill and recreation opportunities in general for the lake. I was concerned about the implementation schedule for the outlet modification because I was afraid it would interfere with restocking of Duck Lake. But those fears have been somewhat alleviated, quite a bit alleviated today. I had a discussion today with Daryl Ellison of the West Metro's Fisheries, and Duck Lake is currently on the docket for stocking this spring with bass, sunfish, and crappies. So we still have the long-term issue. We still need to get the outlet back to where it used to be, but at least it's one step.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Hearing, seeing nothing. We'll proceed to item 4, which is the Earhart Farms Trail alignment.
President Penderson, managers with us tonight is Mr. Dan Blake, who is representing Mr. Earhart on the Earhart Farms. Earhart Farms development is south of Fox Path in Chanhassen, Minnesota on Highway 101 across from Vandermeer Park. Mr. Earhart and Mr. Blake have been in discussions with the city about potential alignments of the trail through that area, especially as it pertains to nature center or nature preserve area of land that has already been dedicated to the city, and then the development that's coming forward. Mr. Blake is asked to speak to the board tonight just to gauge your reception to or feelings on a particular alignment that they are looking to do. And with that, I guess, if you don't have any questions for me, I'd like to invite Mr. Blake and then share my screen. If you could be over there, it's a little easier for the camera. Yeah. Thank you.
Managers, appreciate the chance to talk today. My name is Dan Blake with Black Cherry Development, and as Terry noticed, Tim is
Bringing it up here.
didn't pay attention today, but Mr. Earhart, I should say. I'll wait for
There we
the picture to get up there. So I just want to give us some orientation to the area because you guys know your district, but not every piece of it specifically. We've got Vandermeer Park and what I call 101 on the east side. Here's 212 over here, Lyman to the north. This pretty shaded area is Foxwoods Preserve, which is land that the city of Chanhassen purchased for quite a bit of money to preserve as preservation land. It's a wooded site with some big water area on there. I think it was 57 acres when they bought it. Quite a bit of additional land has been attached to it as development has occurred. So the total area is quite a bit bigger than that. Immediately to the east of the preserve is the Foxwood neighborhood. And I didn't do this, but we do it to confuse people. The neighborhood's called Foxwood. The preserve is called Foxwoods Preserve. I represent the Earhart property, which is to the south. And we developed the first phase of Earhart Farm, which is an extension of the road. And it's actually being marketed as Foxwood 2 because it's the same building. The rest of the land to the south is the future or current owned by Tim Earhart and Tim Andon, who've owned it for 40 years or so. It's likely to get developed in the future. There isn't a current plan for that development, but it's guided for residential and it'll probably happen someday. In the middle of this drawing, there's a wetland body that's labeled proposed boundary fencing. That's not the wetland label. We're going to call that Earhart Pond because we keep talking about it as that one wetland that we're talking about. So we're going to call that Earhart Pond for purpose of the discussion. Our overall objective is to get a bike trail from Vandermeer Park to Foxwoods Preserve. And not as a transportation corridor, but to get people into the preserve. The city bought the land, did a little bit of improvements. There's some walking trails. They don't intend it to be a very developed park, but it's kind of a private preserve for about 10 neighbors. And this drawing that you're looking at is a 2017 drawing when the city approved the park, and it shows some trail access. So we want to get a trail into the park so that people can get into the park. The park character won't change. There'll be one paved trail kind of providing access to a bunch of what are now either dirt or wood chip nature trails. But because of a lot of reasons, we know we can't, and I speak, really this is all city owned, it's a city project, but they kind of challenged us to get figured out. I don't know if they don't have time or they think it's too hard. If it was easy, it would be done by now, but we are gonna figure it out. So the goals get bike trail. My goal tonight is to get the district interested enough in this idea that you tell your staff, go work with the city and Black Cherry and figure this out. I don't expect anything to get figured out tonight, other than if you think it's lunatic, you know, this is just lunacy, tell me that and we can quit. But we think this is a good idea. The city put it on a plan and thinks it's a good idea. They seem to have kind of dropped it as a priority and said, you guys as the more interested property owners, go figure this out. So that's what we're here to get the district enthused. My super high stretch goal is to get you so enthused that you want to partner and pay for half of it because it's some kind of demonstration project or educational project or something. We'll figure that part out later. But I think this makes a ton of sense to do the way this is shown. I'm going to kind of discuss this drawing and the options that are out there. So we're talking about an east-west corridor, a bike path. The city, when they did this plan in 2017, showed two lines. One is purple, one is green. The purple one we'll call the south alignment that they labeled as proposed connection. The green one they called alternative trail connection. I wasn't there. I can't speak to why, but I think I know why they chose one and called proposed, one called alternative. The alternative had to go across property that wasn't anywhere slated to be developed and had a landowner that wanted nothing to do with giving up an easement to get a trail through. That has since changed because we were able to buy that property. It's since been subdivided into two, and we were able to facilitate the city getting all the land necessary for the wetland and where this trail would go. So that section of the trail that lines up with the tunnel across Vandermeer has pretty much been decided that that's going to happen. At the same time, the southeast that would have gone from the trail to Eagle Ridge Road has been decided it's not going to happen, as lots were platted with the Earhart Farm piece. So we still have two options, a north and a south, but they're going to come off the green on, you know, the first part of the green. It's which side of Earhart Pond does the path go? If we go on the south side, there's more room. It's not yet developed. It's not nearly as nice of an alignment because it doesn't line up with the first part of the trail. So you'd take the trail, you'd bike along the side of the road on a off-road path of some kind, sidewalk or bike trail, but, and then take a turn and then come back through. So it might be easier to build that scenario, but the alignment is poorer. The trees on that side that might be affected are much higher quality. They're more oak trees instead of that other side is box elder and ash trees. And if we come in on that south side, we have to cross the wetland. So again, that's where we can't do anything without district approval of some kind, because I can't just say, well, I don't cross the wetland. So something would have to be done to cross, you know, because these little bodies connect to each other. The north alignment is the best on a map. It's what the city shows on their comp plan. It's what we think makes the most sense. There's very little runoff in that area crossing the path, so putting a path in there somehow we can mitigate the impact of runoff. The downside is it's in a buffer controlled by the city and the district. So in theory, you can say, well, we're not going to let you grade no matter what, and then we can't do anything. So that's why we're here talking about this. And it's also more sloped than the other side. So it's a little bit more grading that might have to make it work, probably retaining walls. One of the city's comments to us was, well, it's going to be more expensive to build that. Well, I don't know if it's more expensive or not. This path, as they had labeled, is 1,700 linear feet of trail. About 300 feet of it will be difficult, but nothing ridiculous. So it's a small segment that's going to be more costly than normal, whether it's however it ends up getting built. I see a few solutions on that north side, and that's what I'm looking for input from from you folks on. Do any of these solutions make sense? Or any of them just totally don't make sense? Because you've got rules to live by. You can't just because we're great people, you can't just grant us whatever we want. I get that. So we could figure out how to be in the buffer and build some type of impervious trail. I don't know exactly what that looks like, and then the city's worried about, well, how do they maintain it? And when they say maintain, they think plowing, and I'm not sure if plowing is it a critical component or not, but right now Parks Department would say that's important. So we could be in the buffer, but beyond the minimum distance and fall within the rules and build something that's impervious. Could be a boardwalk, could be pervious paver, I don't know exactly what that is. Second choice in that area on the north side, it's an outlet that's granted the city, and the entire thing was also covered as a buffer. We could find a way to reduce the buffer there down to the minimum and do some buffer averaging trading, because we control the land to the south and we're the ones who want to make this happen. We could probably do that. Our engineer said there's enough land to do that, so that we could end up with sort of a minimum on one side and enough extra on the other side to meet the buffer averaging. But that again would require district to say, yeah, we're okay with that. And then in theory, within the rules, we could do a regular paved path because we're now outside of the buffer. What I want to do is figure out how to embrace the wetland, and I want to be close to the wetland and not out there beyond the edge of a buffer. And I don't know what that looks like. Happened to bike around Rice Marsh Lake today, and I thought the reason people bike around the lake is because they're right next to the lake. Not if I was just going through the woods, I wouldn't care where I was. There might be a way to get people over the water, next to the water, at least in a couple spots close to the water, and make it an experience, a facility. Not you know, it's not maybe it's not an extra special environmental wetland, but it's got water and it's going to have animals in it, and the trees on that side are kind of scrappy. So if I was king, and I'm not, I'd put the trail close to the water, because that would make the better experience. It would enhance the experience of getting over to the preserve. Now my preserve just included some wetland area, so I've got a second experience that I get to bike by or walk by. So all that rambling, I'll go back to my objective for tonight is, you can give us any direction. You can tell staff, this is not a ridiculous idea to put a path through here. Let's figure out how to make this work. I'd say thank you very much. Any questions?
Great. I guess my first question is, what would you see as the most ecologically sound option?
Well, President Ziegler, or I'm going to get it down. President Pedersen, managers. I think it really depends on a number of variables. So this is a medium value wetland fire. So if we can meet the 20-foot minimum and buffer average on the other side, I think that could be a very ecologically sound way to do it. Some other things that have been tossed about, a boardwalk or something of that nature might also, because you could still buffer under the boardwalk. So that's definitely a possibility. I think an impervious surface immediately adjacent to it would not be ideal. If there's another alternative, I think if we were to look at the delineation, look at the lot lines, I have been out on the site. It does look like there's area to get the minimum buffer. Might require a 1-foot retaining wall, 2-foot retaining wall, but for the most part, I think you could do it with fairly minimal disturbance out there on
There's
that
a
line.
little over 40 feet
Yeah.
in that outlot.
Yep.
So if we kept the 20-foot minimum, there's room on a map. We get it, the further we up the hill, the more slope we're
Right.
into, and the more impact of grading and things.
Yep.
Madam President, could you just point on the map what segment we're
Yeah.
talking about again?
It's-
Is it,
Kind of
it's
dotted
green
red line, it's really hard to see.
Here,
and how long is that?
about 300 feet.
That's all?
Excuse me, can you point that out there? Nothing showed up on the.
Oh, sorry.
Screen.
If you look, Manager Cook, if you look at lots 21 and 22 on the north side of the pond, It's that green dotted line that runs on the south side of those two lots. That's the pinch point.
It's really a tiny segment
It is.
in the
right.
scheme of all the
It-
lines up there.
Exactly. And
Okay.
like I said, there's, no matter what we do, there'll be extra costs from the city's end to build that piece. But I don't think it's, the city would have a lot of, collectively, a lot of input. You know, one of the issues, like when we talk boardwalk, they want to drive a pickup on.
Mhm.
That's very different than what I picture of a boardwalk through a nature area.
Mhm.
And so if they need to drive a pickup, that does change their cost a lot.
Madam
Any
President,
other? Yes, Manager Cook.
I don't want to interrupt you. If you're going to say something first, go ahead.
I was going to ask for input from many of the managers, so you
Okay.
were right on.
Okay, thank you. If I could continue, please. Well, I have a couple of 40,000 foot, comments. And this goes back to some other actions, that this district has proposed. So first of all, I'll start out with the proposition that I don't believe that a watershed district is to be in the park business. That's number one. I think that's up to the city or whoever owns the property that's going to be the trail. I think it's incumbent to get the city on board first. I don't think it's incumbent upon a watershed district to be supporting impervious, any type of impervious bike trails. Now, if it turns out the plan is to put in impervious, then it seems to me the district has to look at it and deal with, water and runoff, et cetera. But we've had this discussion on many projects about the avoidance of impervious and to have pervious proper water because of the runoff from impervious, infiltration issues, et cetera. So that's number two. I think in particular we should not be imposing upon the buffer areas to the extent feasible on that basis. And my last comment, again, the 40,000 foot level is that, we have our rules, they're out there. I don't think it's the district's position to be designing impervious bike paths. Our job is to deal with water. Now, certainly we should and will, I assume, react to plans that, as they fall under our rules to make sure that our rules are complied with, some of which, include, buffers, et cetera. But it seems to me this is either a developer's or the city of Chanhassen, issue. And we have a list of projects. We have a 10-year plan, and we need to stick with them. And in my view, the developer or whoever the proponent is needs to come up with a plan that we can comment on. We have enough issues and projects to use up all the money we have for projects that are already on the list. And I can tell you there's just two of them, that there's Bluff Creek and obviously Riley Creek, to name just two of them that have significant issues. So my recommendation is that whoever is proponent of this needs to come up with plans and a concrete proposal, and if they want to apply for permits if needed, and then we should be reacting to it. But we are not in the, just like we don't go in and tell somebody, okay, you want a development, and we don't go out and outline the development, or here, put these lots in here, do this. The proponent needs to come up with a plan for us to react to, and then we need to see how it fits into our priority schedule, into our 10-year plan. And as you know, we already have issues about projects that are outside of the 10-year plan. So I yield. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam President.
Yes.
So I guess I would like to hear from staff, not now, but after they've had a chance to look at this and, obviously engineering and Administrator Jeffrey have lots of experience on similar things. I've almost run into Administrator Jeffrey a few times on the bike paths, so he's well aware of the opportunities there. So I'd like to hear from staff. That's my comment.
Thank you. Manager Crafton.
Okay. I don't know where to begin. All right, so we have a situation here where the context of our decision-making is shifting a little bit. We've kind of got a paradigm shift here because of climate change, and I'm worried about any altered hydrology. So we've just had a winter, supposedly, but we didn't really get a whole lot of precipitation. And if we have more drought, I guess I'd be more comfortable to hear our engineers' evaluation of this and some discussion of the hydrology, but we're really trying to focus a little bit on recharge for our streams and whatever, and enhancing our wetlands. So that's the context, I guess, I want to look at this in to see if we are. I mean, we don't know what this summer's going to be like. Are we going to have another drought because of heat island effects and all of that stuff? I think there's a greater context, so I would want to hear from engineering for sure to just set those,
President,
what we're really looking at.
President Patterson, managers, if we are talking purely from hardcover impervious surface, clearly the southern alignment would result in significantly more impervious surface. It's a matter of if the alignment can be designed in such a way as to minimize or avoid, ideally, any additional impacts beyond just that impervious surface. Obviously, a boardwalk would be superior in just terms of ecological benefits. So if I can kind of sum up what I am hearing, I'm hearing that Black Cherry should put together some concept plans and sit down and run it by the engineer and myself as to their appropriateness under our rules.
You have another comment?
I do, Madam President.
Sure.
Just to follow up on that, the context again is to review this to get earlier feedback in the loop. That our perspective, as Manager Cook mentioned, is not to potentially partner and help design, but you're looking for early feedback. Is that appropriate?
Yeah.
Response, early feedback in terms of you are going to do whatever you're going to do, but you would like to get feedback from us if we can add feedback.
But I'll give you an example. That area where we think the trail should go, where the city drew the green line, is completely within the buffer, right? If the district said, we have control of this buffer, we're not gonna let you grade no matter what
Okay.
you want. Well, it doesn't, I don't want to bring in a plan that shows that if that's the
Got it.
tone of that, if that's the kind of the position. And I don't know if it is or isn't, but right now you have the regulatory, more than typical regulatory authority, because there was probably good reasons why that whole thing was given up buffer. I don't know if it was just laziness, but it was a city outlet. The whole thing became buffer. The city actually took a trail easement at the top on the lots, but they don't like where that looks in the field because it looks like it's in someone's backyard. So they don't really want to build it where they took their easement on the lots. But again, I don't disagree that we need to make a proposal. But if there's certain things that are out of bounds, we don't want to waste anybody's time talking about them.
So I guess the follow-up would be then to Administrator Jeffrey is this something that we would typically do? Have we done this sort of thing where we've given input in a development project per se?
President Ziegler, Manager Devel, we have met with many developers. Did I do it again?
Okay.
I am so sorry. We met with many developers pre-application. We have found that it makes for a much smoother process in the long run. Yes, it is some staff time that may not be accounted for, but it's a considerable savings on staff time on the back end of it. I guess I would like to propose one question for the managers in terms of what Mr. Blake is asking, and that is the one place where I might suspect would be a no-go would be if they requested a variance from the minimum buffer and that. But I do not want to speak for the managers, but I want to give him clear enough direction so that he doesn't go down an avenue and spend money on a design that has no merit.
So I am in agreement with you, and I'm also very much in agreement that it should not be a bituminous or asphalt path. I'd rather see it be something that's going to be nice and pervious. And if we can figure out how to do some sort of a boardwalk that doesn't have to be the size of a truck, that would be quite nice, at least from my perspective.
Madam President, if I could just have a minute.
Certainly.
You know, we've had this discussion. I just want to go back to, you know, I'm going to assume, and I could be totally wrong, that we have a developer, generally a proponent of a project that comes in and has some idea what they want to do. And our first job is to say, well, here are our rules, and what you want to do here is an issue here, and an issue here, and an issue here. And I'm in agreement. We have this initial conversation, but I agree that we should not be, I don't think we should be looking at variances unless it is absolutely impossible to accomplish a project without it. And so I just reiterate, I agree with Mr. Jeffrey's approach, but we don't have a clean board, and we're not in the business of making the first drawing. Somebody has to make the effort. So I've used up more than my minute. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think, do you have enough to go on now to begin
I
this?
believe we do. I believe we do. We'll meet with Mr. Blake and Mr. Earhart if you would like, in the city, if you want to involve them as well.
Right, again, my goal is that the city listens or figures out what got discussed today and says, okay, we'll re-engage and figure this out. It's city land, it's city money.
Okay.
Mr. Earhart on Pat there, he's kind of managed this area because he's lived there and owned the land. It doesn't benefit our lots. It doesn't benefit, it benefits the community. It doesn't benefit anything we're gonna develop, because which other alignment, or even if it gets there completely from the other side.
At least from my perspective, I'd like to thank you for at least coming to talk to us about it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Madam President?
Yes.
I just have, a couple of thoughts, I mean, Carver County has a park board and significant park, investments. I realize this is owned by the city, but that doesn't have to be infinitum issue. But also, I mean, Chanhassen has, park board, they can create park districts. They can, I hate to say it, it's a dirty word, levy taxes, to support, the public. I'm glad that they're not just jump in and spend money willy-nilly, since I'm a taxpayer, but I think there are other areas that need to be explored. And I also know that there's also Lazard Sam's, et cetera, all kinds of opportunities that I think the proponent should explore. And at least from a money aspect, they should not be looking to us for the money to make this. And the other thing to take into account is the fact that even boardwalks, from an ecological point of view, have a downside, because there is an ecological cost of creating those, and the way they're treated, et cetera. So we should not think that a boardwalk is a be all and end all and is a net non-contributor to our environmental issues. And I yield back. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, I think you probably have enough to go on and staff knows what to do. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Dan.
Next item on the agenda is the presentation on the Lotus Lake and Turtle Lode, the alum treatment. I believe Joel is here to talk to us about this.
Let's start right here.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
President Pedersen, Board of Managers, thanks for having me. It's good to see you in person. This is the first one I've been since you've been back, so it's nice. It's good to see you. So we talked about the Lotus Lake alum treatment. So go to the next slide. If you remember, in 2017, a UAA was done for Lotus Lake. It identified internal loading was about 68% of the load. So that's a pretty large proportion of the phosphorus load to the lake. An alum treatment was prescribed in 2018. We identified 2 zones, a zone on the eastern lobe and a zone on the southern lobe. And then that was applied half dose, just half of the dose, not the full dose, was applied in September of 2018. So we're halfway through the project and we're now 4 years later since that, right? So, okay. So these were the results. This is the phosphorus release rate on the y-axis in milligrams per meter squared per day. And then each station that we monitored. So the 2 stations that we talked about were station 30 and station 50. And you can see after the alum treatment, there was a significant reduction in the phosphorus release sediments. So it went from about 12.5 at station 30 down to about 1, and then went even lower from about just under 10 to less than 1. So the first half treatment had the effect that we were looking for. It reduced the phosphorus loading. But when we went out and did the sediment coring, we said water quality wasn't looking as good as we'd hoped, right, in terms of that. So we said, let's take some samples from some other stations. So we did 10, 20, and 40. And we found that the release rate in some of the other parts of the lake were relatively high. We didn't treat those areas because we were really focused on those 2 high release, highly anoxic areas, okay? So yeah, 10's in the northern part, 20's in the middle there, and then 40 is kind of in that southern, the top of that southern lobe. Okay, so here's water quality following the alum treatment. You can see in the surface water, phosphorus concentrations have dropped significantly. So all the way on the right-hand side there, Terry. We've been meeting the standards since the alum treatment. We did look at the plots. I didn't get them in here. I just got them this afternoon, but that's continued in 2023. Okay, very similar. So we're meeting water quality standards. It's had a benefit to the surface waters. If we look at the next slide, now we're looking at bottom phosphorus and the concentrations, right? And that's what's building up in that hypolimnion, which we were trying to stop. And you can see the peaks are significantly suppressed. They are lower, but there's still some phosphorus release occurring still in the lake. That's not unexpected. We only did a half dose, right? We didn't do the full dose. So we know there's still phosphorus that we haven't targeted yet. We have suppressed it significantly, and that's improved water quality. You go to the next slide. This is that initial half dose for Lake Riley. Okay, so I want to remind you of what happened in Lake Riley. The alum treatment occurred in 2016, and see how it was suppressed in 2016, and what happened after we put the first half dose in. It started to creep back up, just like Lotus Lake, right? Because it was only half the dose. We haven't inactivated all the dose. We did the second dose, and look what happened after 2020. And we got the full dose in there, and that's actually held in 2023 also. It's been very low in those concentrations. Okay, so this is kind of expected. We did the half dose. Now we need to figure out what's our next step. We got to do the remaining dose to kind of finish the inactivation project. Should we do some additional areas, or should we just repeat what we did? Go to the next slide. So we did a number of alternatives. That's in the memo that we submitted to the district. And we looked at a number of ways that we could do this. And this is the one that we kind of settled on, we thought made the most sense. What we did was we reduced the phosphorus treatment area to greater than 15 feet in this zone and in this zone. It's not shown on that blob. I apologize for the map. I just realized that. But we reduced the area of treatment to just the 15-foot contours. And then we took that alum that we would have treated in that area and we moved it so that we could treat this zone here and then a zone up in the northern part to attack those areas where we saw some higher release in that kind of process. Okay, and so this approach would give us a new map to work with. And this year, it would be about $250,000 that would complete the dose in this zone here, in this zone here, the two original zones, and do a half dose in those other zones. And then the second half dose for those other zones could be done 2 to 4 years later as we're finishing the project or looking at how water quality responds. Okay, so so the cost this year would be around $250,000. The second half dose would be 2025 or 2026. Again, we can let water quality guide that determination of when we really do that. And the cost of that second half dose would be around $110,000. So I think that's it. I think that's the next slide. So that's our recommendation for the next steps of the Lotus Lake elm treatment. Questions?
So, Madam President, could you go back to the previous slide? So the reason for the splits in the Lotus is the 15-foot contour level? Is that why not that little piece where there's nothing?
In here?
Right, right.
Well, we can. So our goal when we do an alum treatment is to be 100%, is to be as effective as we can at improving water quality without putting more alum in than we need to, right? Every gallon extra that we put in costs extra money.
So that's the rationale for doing the chunks like this.
You got it.
And with time separation.
You got it.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
President Pedersen, Manager Development. Also, if you look at the release rates, that area that is not being included has the lowest release rate at this time.
Okay,
Right. We're trying to let the data guide us and where we put the alum and how much we put in.
So which stations? 10 and,
So we're proposing to add 10 in the northern side here and add this lobe here at station 40,
So the green and the yellow.
green and the yellow. Yep. And then we would do the second half dose in the two deeper areas, but we would narrow that application area. Instead of doing 10 to the deepest point, we'd start at 15 feet and do that. And the idea there is to save money and move that alum around in the lake and where we're applying it to be effective.
Mr. Jeffrey, how's our budget for that this year?
President Pedersen, managers, we have adequate budget for the initial dose. We would have to adjust our budget for the 25-26, but that's certainly a doable proposition.
Madam President,
Yes, Manager Cook.
well, again, just to interest full disclosure in case, somebody doesn't know, I live on Lotus Lake. I live kind of where that bump, I don't know, Mr. Jeffrey can show you a little lower than that. Yeah, right about there. So here's my concern. There has been, it's a little less now, but there has been significant wake boat traffic on Lotus Lake. And the studies that I'm aware of all show that these wake boats have significant impact on the bottom of these lakes in the 25 or 20 to 25 foot and less depths. So my obvious concern is that we would be putting money into these shallower depths only to have this treatment be disturbed by this wake boat action. And as a result would, I would say could run a significant risk of wasting a significant amount of money. So I think, and I've proposed this before, this is the first time, this goes back several years. I proposed monitoring, in the shallower depths. I believe there was some monitoring done, and there was a report maybe last year that in the shallower depths, there was significant spike in the phosphorus, et cetera. And it looks like maybe your diagram supports, that issue. But we don't know until the treatment. So my thought is that rather than spend all the money that we're proposing, that we pick one of those two spots, 10 or 40, and we do some testing, and we do controlled approach rather than spending all the money in both of those locations, spend the money on one of those locations and do some monitoring, given the fact that we do have this wake boat issue, on Lotus Lake, and it's extreme and significant on Lotus Lake because you are talking about some of the shallower areas, at least up on the north end, and where the wake boat goes, and also those narrow passages, which are too narrow to allow the wakes to subside by the time they get. And these wakes they're like tsunamis. Everybody knows this. They only slow down based upon the friction of the bottom and the weight of the water that they basically have to push, or the wave has to migrate through. So I appreciate a response to my concerns about spending money without doing some testing and analysis on maybe just one portion.
Mr. Bischoff, would you like to respond to that?
So there's a couple of things I'd say to that. I have some questions too that I'd like to ask about what that monitoring would look like in terms of what are we trying to measure and what are we trying to understand. The research that I'm aware of, there's a study going on in Maine right now where they did an alum treatment to a relatively shallow lake. And they've done a lot of modeling and monitoring where they've actually looked at sediment resuspension as a result of wake boats, because they were asking the very same question: is it going to disturb the alum treatment? In that study and in some of the other studies I've seen, 15 feet seem to be where the dissipation of the energy from those wake boats goes way down. So if we're below 15 feet, right, there shouldn't be very much energy or any energy to resuspend those sediments. So that's kind of why we chose 15 feet to some extent, was, once you get down there, you're below where any wind energy would resuspend that, where the wake boats or any boat energy. So we're trying to stay below that. The second comment I have on that is if you do resuspend, let's say the alum's there and it gets mixed up into the water column, I want to make the point that it won't grow algae still at that point. Once that phosphorus is bound to aluminum hydroxide, which is what we're creating in there, it's no longer available for algae. So it could mix up into the water column and it's still not going to grow algae. So once it's inactivated, it's inactivated. So what could happen is that it could focus. So if you resuspended in some of the narrower area here, it would focus into the deeper area. And that could expose some of that deeper sediment if that were to occur. But really, I think what we're trying to do is to shut down the top 5 centimeters. Even if there was some disturbance at 15 feet, you're not disturbing 5 centimeters worth of sediment. It's usually 1 centimeter worth of sediment. Okay, so if we have time, you do an alum treatment in the fall, you allow that alum to incorporate into the sediment in those 5 sediments. Even if you do resuspend it, it should minimize the impacts on that. I honestly, for sure, would redo or finish your alum treatment in the 2 deeper areas. Those are greater than 15 feet down to 20, 25 plus feet. And you really need to kind of finish that process. The wake boats won't disturb that kind of part of it. I don't believe, based on the research that we have to date, that it'll disturb even in these shallower areas, and that those would be valuable to still do.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Manager Cook, perhaps you would like to have the results of the study from Maine so you could take a look through that?
Well, I could, but there's also Vermont and there's also Wisconsin. Maine is not the only one, and far be it. So there is lots of data out there. Besides, we have the University of Minnesota, is already doing their own work, and I know they've been taking a little bit longer. All kinds of reasons. I don't have to, rehash that. What I'm looking for is to try to utilize this as a means for somebody to figure out a means. Can we use this to help determine what impact, if any, that we're going to have, to the alum treatment? But secondly, if we're disturbing the phosphorus in the less than the 15 feet, okay, and that, I don't know, I have done the square footage, are we losing impact here? Are we putting a lot of money in a hole only to disturb it. And then, as you know, gravity is going to pull the stuff toward the deeper items. And I can only imagine that over time, just as what's happened in the past, over time, untreated sediment could end up being deposited in the deeper ones and deeper areas, and therefore reduce the overall efficacy of the treatment. Not like you said, once it's bound, it's bound. What the issue is that you have new untreated materials covering treated materials. If you have untreated materials with phosphorus in, that phosphorus could be subject to release since it is not bound to alum. So I think I would think it would need some something to look at, and I would not disagree that, perhaps we finish the deeper ends. I know these studies say that these props or these wake boats go down somewhere in the 20 to 25 foot. There's lots of literature out there that these can do that. And you can shake your head all you want, Mr. Jeffrey, it's true. Well, it's out there on that basis. And so I would agree that I think it would be smart to finish the deep spots, and then look at maybe trying one shallow spot. But we got to have the money, in the first place. So I would be in favor of finishing our original treatment and then monitoring these other locations and come up with a plan to appropriately monitor these. So I yield back. Thank you.
Any other managers' comments?
Yeah.
Manager Kraft.
Well, Joe Bischoff is a preeminent expert in the state. I don't know that they come any better. And I have complete faith in his analysis, and so I definitely would support what Mr. Bischoff's proposed.
Any comment?
I think there's more data to come. That's always the truth. So I think definitely finishing what we started makes sense. And if we can learn something in the process, that makes sense too. But we've got the expert in front of us. If he doesn't know, then I don't.
Manager Duval, do you have any comment?
I totally agree with the two comments.
Okay.
We should proceed with the plan, and as we learn more information, make further judgments down the line.
I would agree as well. So I think you have at least some input from us in which to come up with what the actual, here's what we want to do sort of deal.
So
We need to vote on
next
it.
step,
Next step would be a
plans and specs, right? Yep, okay.
pass.
Okay, thank you so
Thanks very
much.
much. Good to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
We are on to the reading and approval of minutes. So do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Manager Duval. Anybody have any changes?
So I've got one comment.
Okay.
I noticed we take attendance, but in a hybrid meeting, you probably need to record, who's present in person and who's, so I think that, it's a
We need a roll call.
simple asterisk beside the name or something.
Right,
There is,
That's what we have.
that's a good idea.
It is one.
Is there?
yeah, but on the front page of the minutes.
The
I guess I
President
didn't
Pedersen
notice.
managers, they've used an asterisk to identify.
Not very prominent.
Yeah, I guess we haven't noticed it. Maybe you better make it like a darker or something. We're a little slow.
Or italicized, something that.
Manager Crafton.
On page 15, Mr. Helgeson's first name is Bruce. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's right.
Okay,
Page.
it says Brace.
Oh,
Oh, it is Brace. Brace.
That's
Yeah,
what
it is Brace.
Oh,
Oh,
it
that's what I'm
is.
asking, okay,
Yep.
because I couldn't remember. Okay, then it's fine.
okay, hearing no other changes to the minutes, I think we can vote. Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Abstain.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 with one abstention.
Thank you. On to the committee reports, and we will start with the committee reports and at the end, come back and do the resolution to receive the reports. So the first one is the governance committee report.
President Pedersen, managers, I'll speak to that at the last governance committee report. We finished up any edits, discussed timeline moving forward, and really boiled down to having the audit and finance committee finish the financial policies section so that there would be one unified document. Audit and finance, and we'll get to that, met and went over those policies. Our hope is at the April workshop to be going through the governance manual with the managers.
Any questions? Hearing none. Let's talk about the audit and finance committee report. Would anybody like to speak to that?
Any questions on?
Any questions?
board? We've been reviewing the policies and making on comments, and we had some that came out of our meeting today, but they're not part of this minutes.
Okay, hearing no other questions or comments about the audit and finance committee report. Next is the Citizens Advisory Committee. I believe we have a representative. Yes, we do.
Go slow.
Thank you for coming and being with us today.
There you go. You're live. It's still fine. Nope, you're good.
The screen.
You're fine, as long as it's going red.
All right. Good evening, Madam President, board managers. My name is Bonnie Nelson, and I'll be representing the Citizens Advisory Committee tonight. We have no new motions for the board from the committee. We had a learning presentation from Zach Dickhausen, the Natural Resources Coordinator, and he presented on the wetland program. And we talked about wetland restoration overview, wetland assessments, prioritization of wetlands, WACA, and wetland delineations. We had a lot of questions and discussions like we did at the regulatory one. And this time everything was recorded and it's on the YouTube channel. So if you want to see what we talked about, and it also includes 20 minutes of us asking lots of questions and his responses. So you can see what we were concerned about, a lot of conversation about wetland banking and whose authority. Is it the local government unit, and how does that work with the watershed district? And one of the things that Liz talked about was that I think should follow up is some sort of a flow chart that shows who has authority in the different areas. Would be really helpful because it's really confusing to people. We monitor wetlands, but yet we can't do anything about if they disappear. So anyhow, we talked a lot about that. Last month, Jeff Weiss presented some highlights of our meeting, and Board Manager Cook asked about if the CAC still maintains a motions list. We do, it's on our Google Drive, but we've talked about we need to do a better job of identifying issues from that motions list and making it easier for you to find. So we'll be talking about that at our next meeting. And I don't think we have any urgent issues to bring up, but it's something we need to discuss and know for, like, when I come, what I would highlight to you guys that we'd like you to look at. We have another staff presentation next month, and that will be Josh Maxwell and Andrew Hartman. They'll provide a water quality update. Hopefully this is recorded as well if technical doesn't have any problems.
It is.
And just new business, we're also going to discuss, we were presented with a CAC member guidance document that identifies the statutory basis for the CAC, purpose, our duties, and some recommended actions for being a committee member. So we're going to go over that next time, and it'll be helpful that people know what's sort of expected of you to be at the CAC.
Does anybody have any questions?
Madam President,
Yes, Manager Cook.
thank you. Well, I just want to commend the CAC for, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at my bigger screen because of my eyesight. So that's why I'm looking sideways. I apologize. My camera's on the other computer. So I would just want to commend you for haven't recorded that presentation. I look forward to listening to it, and I hope you continue to record those presentations by staff. Those kinds of presentations, it would be nice if we could even, live stream them so we could participate or listen to them, firsthand. But again, congratulations. Thank you for recording those, and look forward to seeing advances on your motions list to keep us managers on task. And thank you for your service. I yield.
Thank you, Manager Cook.
President Patterson, managers, I just want to point out, people at home or in the audience, if you're looking for our YouTube channel, you can obviously search in our PBCWD on the YouTube or go to our What's Happening page, and all our recorded meetings there's a link to that there.
Thank you. So it looks like we need to confirm a representative for their March 18th meeting. Anybody volunteering for that?
Volunteer.
Manager Duval will be the attendee for that. Okay, and now I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the committee reports, which would be Resolution 2024-019.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And any comments at all? Questions? None? Hearing nothing?
Madam
Yes.
President?
Yes, Manager Cook.
I just have a suggestion that perhaps staff could consider when we organize the agenda, if maybe we should include all of the reports in one section under one motion. My suggestion for consideration would be to, unless somebody had strenuous objection, move to accept all of the reports and then allow people to have, if they have particular questions, they could ask them. But otherwise, I think it would kind of save us time. We put all those reports in one. That's just a suggestion going forward. So I yield back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manager Cook. Okay, I believe we're ready for the vote on the motion.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Next, we're moving to the consent agenda, which has items E and F removed. So that is items A, B, C, D, G, and H. And I'd entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'd like to move the consent agenda with resolution 24-020.
Thank you, Manager Crafton.
I'll second.
Thank you. Hearing any objections? Nothing? Okay, I guess we're ready to the vote.
On the consent agenda, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Abstain.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 with 1 abstention.
Let's move on to old business. Item 9. First item is adopting resolution 24-016, authorizing BAR Task Order 45 to develop a district-wide groundwater monitoring network. Do I hear a motion for that, please?
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 24-016, authorizing BAR Task Order 45 to develop a district-wide groundwater monitoring network.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Manager Crafton. Any comments?
Madam President.
Yes, Manager Cook.
So I'd like to, repeat my, concerns about moving forward with this groundwater monitoring. As I stated before, if we're going to do anything on this, we should have it in segments. And the first segment should be a summary of the prior groundwater monitoring. What was the issue? What was the problem? Why it was done? Then why was it stopped? And then what do we hope to gain for reinstituting a groundwater monitoring? I've not heard of any problem that we are facing that we need to address. Unless there is one, I don't think we should be, searching for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. So I'm not in favor of that. And then secondly, maybe a small matter, but I think is a very important matter of attention to detail on the second page, at least of the copy that I have. It says 2023 and not 2024. So those are my comments, and I think we should. So I'd like to move to table this, Matt, and have staff come back with a more ordered breakdown of tasks to be accomplished. The first one to be to give us a summary of what was done, why it was stopped, and what we propose to discover with a groundwater monitoring, just plain process.
So you have a motion that you've made. Do I have a second to that motion? Hearing no second, the motion fails. I believe the resolution is on the table. Does anybody have anything else they would like to comment on before we vote?
Madam President, yes. I think there's several important things we need to know. We know historically from information from the cities that the groundwater level varies with the climate. With the season. And it has been trending down for many years. We also know that we've got some salt pollution already in some of the groundwater. So it seems like we need to know what we don't know. That's why we need this program.
Thank you. Any other comments?
So I would agree with that totally. Those are good comments.
I concur. I think it's something really important for us moving forward. So we need this information. And it's going to help us with our understanding of surface water, groundwater interaction. So it's imperative, really.
I also concur. I believe at this point, we're ready to vote on the resolution 24-016.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Next on the agenda is to adopt resolution 24-017, authorizing task order number 46 to analyze the potential Duck Lake outlet modification. Would you like to speak on this just a bit before we vote?
President Pedersen, managers, I would like to speak as much to say that I'm going to defer to Engineer Sobiek as he has been intimately involved in the review of all of the modeling of Duck Lake through the bridge process and prior things. So, Engineer Sobiek.
Managers, what you have before you here tonight is a task order to do some additional surface water modeling of Duck Lake to try to recreate conditions or an outlet condition that would mimic historic conditions. A little bit more background for the managers. Duck Lake was originally landlocked prior to development. In the late 60s, an outlet was constructed, permitted by the DNR, constructed. That outlet was requested to be modified in the 70s. The DNR denied that modification. Sometime in the 70s, early 80s, the modification occurred. But the modification was such that, well, it changed the control level. It was such a way that it tended to plug. So a lot of debris would build up on the outlet. So that's why the lake never really realized the lower elevation that unofficial modification would have resulted in. So the lake generally tended to stay at a higher elevation for decades until 2014, when the city of Eden Prairie went in and cleaned the outlet and modified the grate around the outlet. They didn't change the control elevation. They just sort of modified that grate. And now it tends not to plug as frequently. And we're seeing lower lake levels over time. If we look at historic lake levels, a trend, you can see a clear break. Lake was generally about a foot and a half higher pre-2014 from where it sits today. So the goal with this is to go ahead and try to design an outlet configuration that would mimic those historic conditions. Well, keeping the control elevation the same. The reason we need to do that is in conversations with the DNR, they're very adamant that that control elevation cannot change unless you get 100% of the riparian owners to support the petition and the city to support the petition, all sort of kumbaya together, which is a really, really high bar. And the DNR was very reluctant to even approach that topic. So they said, we're open to, if you can propose a change that can mimic the elevation without modifying that sort of lower control elevation. So with this task order, what we're looking at doing is some computer simulations using historic climate information, long-term modeling, so modeling 20, 30 years of information to see what configuration can help release water at a slower rate so that the water level sits higher for a longer period. One of the complicating factors is even if we are able to come up with a solution, a design that achieves the goal, just so folks understand, this outlet sits on railroad company property, which anytime you work with the railroad, it is very difficult to get permission to work on their property. Not impossible, but it takes an exorbitant amount of effort and time. So even if we come up with an outlet, ultimately we need to coordinate with the railroad to get permission to go in and do the modification. Any questions?
So I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution 24-017, authorizing BAR task order number 46 to analyze potential Duck Lake outlet modifications.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Manager Ball seconds. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Madam President, so what we're trying to do in non-engineering terms is by analyzing it, if we can figure out a way to restrict the flow, but maintain the flow so that the natural level would rise, and I'm not quite clear on the understanding. So we're trying to modify the flow without changing the dynamics or the dimensions of the whatever is there, so that it slows down in the event that the lake rises a little bit above where it's currently residing, that it flows out slower.
President Pedersen, managers, perhaps this is where a non-engineer can step in. Yeah, and that's, think of a bathtub where your washcloth is over a part of it. It's still the same outlet elevation, but yes, you've restricted that flow. Or a catch basin grate in a road that's all plugged with leaves. You get the flooding on the streets. So the normal water will remain where it is, but the extended bounce period, or where that water level comes up, will be for a much longer duration.
So we're looking to potentially come up with a solution that would be not leaves in the drain, but some element that is by design. So not nature.
President Pedersen, Manager Duval, absolutely. And Administrator Jeffrey was spot on talking with the bathtub analogy. I mean, it's, if you think of your bathtub drain, you don't move the drain, but you can keep the water in the bathtub by putting your washcloth over it, or by putting, rather than an inch drain, you put a straw in it. So you just change the size of that.
Okay.
You haven't changed the control elevation, but you've changed how quickly that water goes in or out.
So this wouldn't be perceived as a workaround by anybody that's telling us to not do it?
President Pedersen, managers, when we met with Jack Leeson, who would be the supervisor of the hydrologists in this area, he was actually the one that put forward this idea as a possibility to do. He was very clear at that time. I'm not saying we will permit this, but this is a likely solution. So yes, it maybe is a little bit of workaround, but it's with the DNR's blessing.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Madam President,
Yes, Manager Cook.
well, I have to seriously object to this artificial means of trying to do something which is not clear, is clearly not within the intent of the elevation for draining this lake. That this is just plain false and downright misleading. And I don't care who suggested it. The right way to do it is to approach these riparian owners and at least try that, get their permission, and do it the right way. Not by trying to hide the ball or stuff a rag around the drain, etc. That is not the honest approach. The honest approach is to go and do what, at least I think the honest way, first of all, try to find out who can, if we can get the consent, and then we go to the DNR. The world is full of people trying to, say yellow is red, et cetera, and we don't need to participate, in this type of process. And I'm sorry for those on Duck Lake. I mean, it should be changed, but we do it the right way. We don't do it by artifice on that basis. And, I'm sorry the drain was covered for too many years and you had a higher level, but I still haven't seen a study saying, what is the detriment for having it a foot lower or a foot, or a foot higher. So I'm just certainly not in support of going forward with, a process that's just an artifice for trying to, violate the rule. And we should first at least try the one that, where it's a clear petition to get the DNR to change it, or otherwise, petition for a change. But they've apparently clearly stated before, no, you can't go change the elevation. That's the right way to approach it. So I yield.
Madam President.
Yes, Manager Crafton.
Okay, so hearing Engineer Sobiek's summary of this, the fact that the DNR would be fine if everybody signed off in the city says to me they could be fine with this. So it's not like they're totally in opposition. They just want to make sure their bases are covered, it sounds like. Because otherwise, if they totally oppose it, wouldn't they just say no? But if they're saying, if you got everybody's permission, then fine. So I would, yeah. For me, that
Madam President.
colors it.
Yes, Manager Ziegler.
So to respond to, we don't have evidence of the change. We have huge evidence of a change. We didn't have winter kill this year because we didn't have winter. But every other year since they made the change, we had winter kill. And I personally picked up hundreds of fish that were, I would have loved to caught them before they died. But, by the time spring gets around, they don't look so good anymore. But there's nothing left in the lake as far as fish, except for minnows that are, tiny little things, goldfish and bullheads. So there's no game fish left. And the DNR has agreed to stock this year in anticipation of a better lake level. So that tells me that they're in favor of doing this. I don't know why we shouldn't at least do the engineering and present something that the city and the DNR and the residents can agree to.
Manager Cook, you had a comment or a question?
Well, again, it was established at a certain level, and there's obviously a process to go change that, and we should be following that, that process and not coming up with some subterfuge, to try to get around it. And so if you're right that they're going to, why would they agree to the wash rag around the drain and not just simply say, okay, let's raise the outlet. I don't understand that. So why do we think all of a sudden they're going to, go for the wash rag, answer on that basis, and we're going to spend money on doing this? I don't even see why we have to spend money on it. We just say, hey, we're going to put a culvert around the drain, and it's going to be 1 foot taller. I mean, this is not rocket science. And submit it to them and say, okay, here's a simple, cheap proposal. We don't have to spend $16,000 or whatever it is. You can write it up in 5 minutes and run it up the flagpole, as they say. Let's just cut to the chase and say, this is what we want to do. It's pretty darn simple.
So I'd like to call for a vote. I think we spent enough time on talking about this. I'd like to call the question. Is that the right word?
I do have one follow-up question, which is, what are the chances that the railroad would not let us go on the property if this actually gets developed and everybody approves it and likes it?
President Patterson, managers, that's a hard one to answer. So the city approached the Railroad Authority back when they were first looking at doing it as part of the permit. And the railroad tried to use that leverage. Their request was that the city waive their stormwater management fees throughout the city. It'll just take some time. I think it's, like everything, there is a solution, just a matter of getting to it.
All right, we've had the question called. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Table,
Pardon?
are we tabling first? Or, the stopping debate, I mean.
Yes, we're stopping debate.
Madam President, just as a matter of parliamentary procedure,
Do we need a second and a vote?
if you wish to close debate, you need to go through that. If you're done debating, you can just proceed to the vote.
Okay.
All right?
Either way is fine with me.
Sounds like we're done with the debate.
Okay. Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 24-024, amending the order for the Upper Bluff Creek Restoration and Stabilization Project.
Manager Pedersen or President Pedersen, managers. I got them. We brought before you in December of last year a resolution to do the Upper Bluff Creek. But within that, it was not clear that the culvert was contained within it. So this is just a modification to that resolution to clearly spell out the monies that will be spent and that is part of the project.
I'd entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 24-024.
So moved.
second.
Thank you. Thank you, Manager Duval, Manager Crafton. Do we have any questions? Comments?
Madam President,
Yes, Manager Cook.
this is a material change to a previously approved process that went through, I believe it went through the planning process. So this is not a minor matter. This is something that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars if I read it correctly, which is going to be some 30 or 40%, I believe, of the original cost. So this is not something, in my opinion, that is subject to an amendment without going through the appropriate plan amendment process, given that this was part of the 10-year plan.
Could you respond to that for us, Mr. Smith, or?
Madam President, managers, I think both Mr. Jeffrey and Mr. Sobiek can back on this up on the substance. The legal notion here would be that this is a clarification and that it is based on the record that was made and that this is not a material change that affects the participating parties in the project. But I think either of these gentlemen could explain why.
President Pedersen, managers,
Thank you.
that is included within the reach. If you'll remember, over a year ago, we came to you with the opportunity to replace the culvert. At that time, it was a substantial cost, nearly $750,000. And we, as a board, decided that we did not want to move ahead with it, but that if partners could be found and that price reduced, that we would. When we came to you in December, we described the culvert as part of this project in the partnership with the city of Chanhassen. So it was brought to the Board of Managers at the December meeting. But in review of the resolution that was drafted, Council Welch felt that it was not clear that that was part of it. And so that is the reason for this.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Madam President,
Manager Cook.
I think it's important for the record for me to state that I disagree with Mr. Smith's characterization. This is a ongoing and continuing effort to try to come up with some different definition of material. This does not comply with the 10-year plan process and requirements. And I hope we don't have to end up in the same places we are with certain other proposed plan amendments. It's a matter of the process. I can't imagine anybody in any stretch of imagination would say that all of a sudden, oh, this was something we just forgot about, or an oversight, or an oversight to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just doesn't add up and doesn't cut it. So why don't we just do it the right way? Come up with the amendment to the plan for this project, which is part of our 10-year plan. Have the requisite, go through the requisite procedure, do it the right way. And instead of trying to constantly come up with excuses for not following the rules. So I yield. Thank you.
So we don't, I believe, have a motion on the board so far to.
We had a
We do.
motion and a second.
Okay, we had a motion in a second. Okay. Any other comments before we vote? Hearing none.
On resolution 24-023, Manager Crafton,
2-4.
4, isn't it?
24.
Yes.
Thank you. Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen,
Yes.
motion carries 4-1.
We're on to new business. Our first item would be to approve permit 2023-024, which is the 101 culvert replacement. Would anybody like to address this? We're at item E right here. So Manager Cook, I believe you pulled this. Do you have some questions about it?
Well, I do, as a matter of fact. So one thing that I wanted to understand was what kind of capacity, has the capacity for this pipe been adjusted to based upon our anticipated, maximum rainfall events under whatever it is, Atlas 14? That's what first question. Is there any type of, does this include any type of water retention or slowing through gating, et cetera? And guess last, but not least, is this culvert, probably 5,000 PSI concrete, but is it otherwise treated exterior and interior and on the interior to maximize its lifespan? Because I know that those things do exist. And if we're going to be, I don't think we'd want to have a situation where this isn't going to happen, or that this would fail in the future. So those are my question. Capacity, water retention slowing as part of this, change. And then ultimately the, conditioning of that pipe.
Engineer Sobiek, would you like to address that? I'm assuming.
President Pedersen, Manager Cook. First question regarding the capacity adjustment to account for new rainfall events, Atlas 14. The applicant is really only proposing to replace the upper portion of the pipe and then the far downstream portion. The main pipe underneath the road will remain unchanged. The DOT, Department of Transportation, did a video, ran a camera through it, and they determined through their assessment that the steel pipe under the roadway is in adequate condition. And they did not want to replace the entire pipe. So they are replacing the upstream portion, which is a corrugated metal pipe, which is highly deteriorated based on their imagery, and there was a photo of it in the permit report. And then the downstream end, they want to extend that downstream a little bit further so they can essentially flatten the roadway embankment slope so they can remove a retaining wall that's failing. So, and the materials that they'll be using concrete. They're proposing to use reinforced concrete, which has a life expectancy of anywhere from 50 to 100 years, which is more than adequate. And the last question with respect to water retention, with this proposed crossing, they are not proposing any new water retention or detention to meet the requirements of the rules. They're not required to do so. The upstream pipe that they're replacing will essentially connect up to the outlet from Lotus Lake as it currently does. And then they're extending the pipe downstream. So there is no new water really getting into this pipe.
Manager Cook, does that answer your questions?
Well, I guess maybe it's a question for us as district. If they're going to be doing this work on this culvert, is there something, should we be proposing some improvements that would give us, you know, whether it be necessary, you know, control, erosion, I guess, reduction, et cetera, or is there no need for any additional work in connection with this culvert addition? I guess we'd be calling it a culvert addition as opposed to necessarily a replacement.
Engineer Sobiak, what do you think?
President Pedersen, Manager Cook, in terms of additional work that the district could do, potentially some minor stream bank stabilization downstream of this, but they're already doing some of that where they're required to. So we would be looking at extending it beyond their project reach. With respect to the culvert, the steel pipe under the roadway itself, there's always an opportunity to replace pipes when they're in there doing work. However, the Department of Transportation was very clear when Administrator Jeffrey and I approached them that they do not want to replace that culvert because they don't want to shut down the roadway. And then in order to do it, the department was saying they would need to open cut it in order to install a completely new pipe. Now, there are alternatives to open cutting, but the department was very reluctant to go down that path.
Well, it just seemed to me, if I could continue, Madam President, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You know, it just seems to me that, you know, a project like this and spending, I get a little, my thought is penny wise, pound foolish a little bit. They're spending all this money on both ends of it, and not to do something to, you know, that under the roadway, because the only reason is they don't want to shut it down. I believe there's what do you call it? Slipping, or, you know, you slip a pipe into it, you know. Well, it seemed to me that would be something that would be, you know, worth considering if you're going to go through all that effort of tearing up both ends. But do you have an opinion as to the condition of the pipe under the roadway?
Based on the video that I've seen, the pipe is in acceptable condition. In terms of the lifespan remaining, I cannot speculate on that. The department feels like it has an adequate lifespan for what they need. Ultimately, there are methods that they could use if something were to start to deteriorate in the future. They could come back in and do a slip lining. The managers have approved several permits for slip lining of culverts in the past. Essentially, you just slide a plastic pipe through it and it can be fit right inside the pipe. So there are options. And even in the future, once the roadway's redone, repaved, if something catastrophic were to happen with the pipe, they could essentially push another pipe through the embankment. Hydraulic jacking a pipe is what it's called. And they wouldn't have to open cut. At this point, though, they were like Administrator Jeffrey and I, we pushed pretty hard trying to get them to replace this pipe, sort of one of these once in a lifetime opportunities since you're in here. And they wanted nothing to do with that.
Madam President, just one more second.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, this just is a once in a lifetime opportunity to do that, yeah, you know, in this case, and be done with it. And so my, just come back to the one question I have. I mean, do we feel that that pipe, you know, is adequate, or is it not an issue because Lotus Lake has the dam or whatever it is at that outlet, et cetera? I mean, are we comfortable that, you know, that's properly sized given what we think are going to be the rain events?
The outlet is properly sized for the lake to bounce the way it currently does. If we're talking about mid-century storms and trying to provide long-term flood mitigation, and that's something we haven't looked at. If we were looking at replacing the outlet or the size of this outlet to Lotus Lake, that would be something that would need to go through the Department of Natural Resources. And then we'd also have to assess potential downstream impacts as well with increasing flows downstream.
So we're talking 25 years from now.
Potential.
Right.
Well, you got a better crystal ball than I do, Madam President. I'm finished. I yield. Thank you very much.
I don't believe that we have a motion to approve this permit yet on the floor, so I'd be entertaining a motion.
I'll move.
Thank you so
I'll
much.
second.
Thank you. I believe we've had quite a bit of discussion. Let's go right to the vote.
On permit 2023-074, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes, I think
Pres-
it's 20-024,
Said that.
not 23.
Yep.
20.
Oh, 23.
I've got 23 on mine.
Yeah.
2023-074.
Yeah,
permit.
that's what I have on mine. And I'm also a yes, by the way.
Manager Pedersen, President Pedersen, 5-0.
Okay, the next item that was pulled was permit 2024-004 for Clear Springs Elementary parking lot. Manager Cook, you pulled this. You have some questions.
I did, and I guess one moment, please. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get it to come up here. Oh, here it is. Okay, hang on one moment, please. I make it big enough so I can read it. Am I correct that this parking lot ends up draining into the wetland to the south of the school properties, right? And as part of this, are we requiring the school district to be, what do you call it, smart salt certified or whatever?
That is correct.
Because I asked those questions, you know, it dawned on me, especially during the legislative, you know, session I attended, the big issue about fighting over chloride, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But when I looked at this, you know, it struck me as we've got this huge parking lot now that's going to be salted, and we've got all this runoff. Well, we didn't have as much this year during the winter, but we have all this runoff, and with salt in it, what can we do to try to prevent the salt pollution or minimize the salt pollution in situations like this? Because clearly it's going into a wetland, and it, you know, of any place, it's probably not a good place for it to go. You know, that including a lake. So, you know, especially when you got retention ponds, is there some other mechanism to require these large, and that not just for now, but future, requiring these large lots to figure out something to do to minimize the amount of salt that gets, flushed down into, especially into these wetlands, especially into lakes. And I think I sent to Administrator Jeffrey, I think I sent a couple of pictures to him. One of the situations, I don't know if you have those available, but a couple of situations when there's an Office Depot here or Office Max or whatever it's called here in Chanhassen, and it literally, it is covered with salt crystals, probably 1/4 of an inch deep. And then as I was walking near the, across from the shopping center where the Cub Foods is, walking along that path, there's an example. And so not just related to this permit application, but what can we do to get people to clean up salt in these situations? Can we make that part of permitting or part of the, clean water? I mean, obviously the first rain, it's all going to be down in the storm sewer, and it's going to be in a wetland or a lake. Because I understand it, you don't get salt to settle out other than through evaporation. So this whole project just brought it together with the issue about fluoride treatment, at the legislative process, and what can we do to try to keep these things, from happening? Do we have the ability to require, shopping center owners, if they're going to do parking lots, et cetera, to adopt some procedures to minimize situations, like this? So that's the reason I pulled this, is because my concern that we're getting these bigger and bigger parking lots, more and more salt, and I certainly don't want it to end up like this sidewalk by the, whatever it is, Office Depot, Office Max. So and then bear with me one moment. I think I had one other. And it's particularly disturbing because this apparently goes into a wetland. I see where there's a supposedly chloride management plan. I don't know what our management plan entails, but I hope we would consider including sweeping up salt, that hasn't been dissolved and gone down the drain. Oh, then the last thing I want to point out, and I probably didn't bring this up the last one. You go to page, it's not a big deal. I'm sorry, just slow. 8 of 10. I just point out, it seemed to me that item 2 and 3 under applicable general requirements seem to be more than a little redundant, and perhaps that could be tailored better, or at least certainly in the future when we're talking about these same types of construction issues. So with that, I've finished. I yield. So I would like us to come up with some type of process to try to minimize salt and avoid these issues like I showed you in the pictures. So I yield back. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. So I am now entertaining a motion to approve permit 2024-004.
I'd like to make that motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Manager Duval. I believe we've had discussion. I think we can go to the vote. Mr. Smith?
On permit 2024-004, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
On to item B for new business. That is the accepting the February Treasurer's Report.
To move the treasurer's report for acceptance. It's been approved and reviewed or not approved, but reviewed in compliance with our internal controls and practices.
Second.
Thank you, Manager Crafton and Manager Duval. Any questions about or comments about the February Treasurer's Report?
Madam President.
Yes, Manager Cook.
I know that Audit and Finance Committee today, I don't know if they made any progress on our processes, procedures, and policies, but one thing I'd like to point out again is the issue of, are our balance sheets and income statements based on cash accrual or a combination of both? And the reason I raised the question is because, again, we have, current assets that include basically, accruals. And I know at one time we talked about the fact that we were only going to be recognizing receipts when we actually received the money, but we would be accruing expenses as we went. So I bring this up so the audit finance committee could take a look at this, look at that issue in particular. And it also gets addressed on the issue on page 101 under we had two reimbursement or payments to Chanhassen and Eden Prairie. I believe it has to do with the inspections. I could be wrong, but I think it has to do with the inspection process. And those asterisks, those are 2023 items. And so one question I have, are these being reflected as expenses in 2023 when we do our audit? I think they're reported here only because this is, it shouldn't be really income and expenses. It really should be receipts and disbursements, I think would be better titles. So my question though specifically is, are those two line items actually reflected in the 2023 financials, even though we pay them now? Because to my understanding, we accrue expenses as opposed to book them on the basis of actually having paid them.
So our accountant is adjusting what we will be presenting to or giving to the auditor so that they will be pulled out for the expenses that were done in 2023 will be what is submitted for the audit.
President Patterson, managers, yes. In fact, Redpath sent me earlier today an updated final treasurer's report for 2023, which includes these two expenses, which managers Cook is correct. They were to pay for the AIS inspections, boat inspections on Lake Riley, Lake Ann, Lotus, and I think Susan, they do a few on.
The problem is that we have to wait until they do whatever reconciliation they do, and then they invoice us for tell us what the amount would be.
Yeah.
Madam President.
Manager
I'm sorry.
Cook, yes.
Just two items. Again, I have to repeat, I don't believe it's proper accounting to utilize the credit card as the vendor. The vendor is the actual company who sells it. The credit card company is just a financing arrangement. So I don't believe that's proper, especially as the amount of credit card items, continues to grow, which is understandable. But, it can't be that much work to go and literally book these by the vendor as opposed to the credit card company. Another alternative to that is, I've mentioned this for several years, to acquire get a purchasing card. Okay, purchasing cards, those companies will generate you a report, which you can literally interject right into your accounting system and will save you the time and effort of having to input the actual vendor. They will, part of the report will actually do that for us, because putting it down as the credit card company is misleading, and I think it makes it more difficult to determine whether or not there is any issues, funny business or fraud with our accounting procedures. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have a motion and a second to accept the February treasurer's report. Mr. Smith, did you do a call for us, please?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Next item is the resolution to adopt approving payment of the bills, which is 24-00 or 022.
I would like to move resolution 24-022 and approve payment of the bills.
Thank you, Manager Crafton. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Manager Duval. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. We're ready for a vote, Mr. Smith.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is to adopt resolution 24-023, authorizing the administrator with the advice of council to enter into an agreement for lake vegetation management.
President,
Okay, go ahead.
sorry.
I was going to make the motion to adopt resolution 24-023, authorizing the administrator with the advice of council to enter into agreement for lake vegetation management.
I have a motion and Manager Duval has seconded. I believe we're going to have a little bit of a presentation or questions answered.
Yeah, President Pedersen, managers, this is what we do every year. We, based upon our vegetation surveys, decide upon the lakes we were going to do. Staff Maxwell went out for quotes to 5 entities, I believe, received quotes back from all of them, but not all of them were able to do all of the lakes or all of the treatments. So we did receive, or Staff Maxwell received 5 grants. What grants? We got 3 grants
from the beginning.
which will offset a considerable amount of our costs. We're recommending moving forward with this as is, but Staff Maxwell is happy to answer any questions you might have about it.
Any questions, managers? Hearing no questions, I believe we have a motion and a second. How about a vote, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
I'll abstain.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 with 1 abstention.
I believe that moves us into the discussion items. I believe I turned the first one over to you, Mr. Smith. Is that correct?
Yes, managers, at this time, we would recommend that you adopt a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of receiving confidential legal advice concerning litigation strategy in the matter of Cook versus Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District and Mr. Jeffrey.
I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Maybe please have a vote, Mr. Smith.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Excuse me, I have a comment, please.
Manager
So
Cook?
I want to have assurances that this closed session is going to be limited to legal advice and will not contain information that is not legal advice, and I do not consider the status of the litigation to be legal advice.
Mr.
And you
Smith,
can-
would you like to comment?
Madam President, managers, I believe the motion was to receive confidential legal advice concerning litigation strategy. And that may well include the status of litigation in order to understand the litigation strategy.
Thank you. So let's vote to go to closed session.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
All right, I believe we're back from our break. We had already moved, seconded, and voted on coming out of closed session. So we are now on to item B, which is the acquisition of the Spring Road property. And I think I'll turn this over to Lewis.
Madam President, managers, at this time, we would recommend that you adopt a motion to go into closed session to discuss the development of terms for the potential acquisition of 9955 Spring Road, 9875 Spring Road, and a third parcel with PID number 2811-622-320-005 in Eden Prairie. So that would be the motion.
So I would entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So I'll make the motion. I'm not going to repeat all the stuff that was Mr. Smith just as stated. Yeah.
And I need a second. All right, Manager Duval, thank you so much. Let's take
Madam
the.
President? Excuse me, Madam
Yes,
President.
yes, Manager
It's
Cook.
difficult to hear Mr. Smith. And what is specifically is the purpose for the closed session?
Madam President, Manager Cook, can you hear me now better?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So the purpose is to go into closed session for the purpose of considering the terms of potential acquisition of the 3 parcels of property listed on the agenda.
Well, excuse me. My understanding is the statute, are we talking about changing the price? Are we talking about a non-public appraisal? Are we talking about offers or counter offers?
Session.
All of, Madam President,
Yes,
we're talking about discussing the potential terms of the acquisition. All of those matters are appropriate for a closed session.
Oh, excuse me, Madam President, if I can continue. We have an agreement, the terms of which are known to everyone. So I quite understand why we would be going into closed session when we have an agreement and no foundation has been laid for any of the reasons why you can go into a closed session.
Mr. Smith,
Nothing further to say, Madam President.
thank you. I believe we need to vote on going into closed session. So at this point, please go ahead.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
All right, back to the discussion of the date for our special meeting, Tuesday, March 26th, 10 o'clock. How does that look for everybody?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Manager Ziegler.
March 26th, you said 10 o'clock?
Yes,
Yes, that works.
great. Manager Cook, Tuesday, March 26th, 10 o'clock.
as of right now, that would work.
Great. So that's our date and time. And do we have everybody back?
Yes.
All right, we do. Which means we are now on to item 12, member reports. First item is manager reports. Manager Cook, it looks like you wanted to have a comment about the hybrid meeting configuration.
Yes, I did, if I may proceed.
Sure.
First of all, apparently most of my concerns were taken to heart and changes were made. And so I appreciate that. One issue that there does exist is that I would recommend that everybody have laptops and be able to be tuned into the, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, that was telling me that we're over our time. So basically what I'm saying is that this is great, but we need to, if you go and view this, it's much better than it was, but it's not the greatest view of the board members. And I think they need to consider relocating the position of the camera. In fact, I would suggest 2 cameras, one facing the board and another one facing the screen. But that may not be necessary. Everybody has a laptop with, a camera, et cetera, so we can see them. You can shut off the audio on those and you can use the audio that you have in front of you. Also, I think it would be helpful if the presenter at the podium had a laptop. That way it'd be good to see their face, everybody's face. We do it. The one issue that I did notice was if we have a presenter discussing something that's on the screen, we'd be better if they had a laptop or a mouse by which they could, or apparatus so they could move the mouse on the screen, because couldn't get the picture, the view of the presenter if they were looking at the screen or making motions on the screen. You couldn't see that because the screen projection on the computer overlapped or made it impossible to see that. But this is a vast improvement to the prior presentations. At least I get to see most people's faces. I do have one follow-up question on that. Is I know there was comment about talking to a ventilation person. Did we actually hire a ventilation expert to examine our space?
President Pedersen, managers, no, we did not.
So that answers that question. That's one of my concerns. But thank you for adapting the setup as we had previously discussed. That's Mr. Jeffrey and myself. Since I haven't used up all the time, I had a lot of things I was going to talk about, but I don't have to talk about those. I've already mentioned the salt issue. I think we really need to work about that. Are we going, so a follow-up question, are we going to get some advice memo, et cetera, as to how I guess we call it reinstatement of the official rules regarding employee, not employee, how they might actually impact our organization? I frankly don't believe they actually made it. The rule that was in place during the Trump administration, actually, I don't think had any impact on us. But if somebody thinks it's going to change, I think we should have that addressed. And I'd like to see some memo or et cetera saying what, if any, impact there would be. It seemed to me that would at least call into question using a 1099 versus a W-2, et cetera, et cetera. And then my final point for tonight is want to make part of the record my prior written manager's report regarding the need for human resources person, et cetera. Those items, to my knowledge, have not been addressed, and I think they need to be addressed because, to my knowledge, none of us have that experience or skills on this matter. So I think that is, let me double check. And I have one final question. Has any effort been being made to find state funding for the acquisition of Spring Valley that is being discussed?
President Pedersen, managers, beyond the efforts that we took initially, no.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I yield back.
Any other managers have anything they would like to report?
I just have one comment on the layout. I think, I think you've seen this Eden Prairie layout, and having the visitors and the public behind us is like horrible.
Yeah, but I don't know how else to do it because we've got a projector up here.
Right.
So we can't put the projector somewhere else.
I mean, I guess we could hire someone and see what the cost would be to move it over.
Yeah, point it in the other direction.
I mean, we could, We got the pillar over there then, so we'd have to, because we'd have to slide this.
Yeah, is it possible just slightly move this so, and then
And then
the
over
audience over
here, so
here?
then we can see them.
Yeah, we could cram it. Way it up to there, shove them in the cupboard.
Maybe if our engineer could lay something out, then we could at least look at it before we, well, actually, these move probably as easy as his pencil on a piece of paper.
And then,
This civil.
and then the other thing, oh, I don't-
Go ahead, I'm
Comment.
done.
I made a comment earlier that, so the cursor on the screen is okay, but it's, even that is hard to see. It's jerky and so I'm wondering if the presenter had actually a little laser light
Yeah.
on the screen.
We actually bought some, I just didn't take about today.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Because it took a while before I figured out what segment we were talking about before, and there was no easy way to point it out, I think, where we were. Anyway,
But the laser pointer wouldn't work for people
wouldn't work for the home screen.
remotely.
Right.
Yeah.
Look into that. I mean, they do make highlight cursors that you can move on a screen, so.
Any other manager reports? Hearing none?
Madam President,
Yes.
I just want to follow up on this discussion. You could put if you're worried about the public, you can put a row of chairs behind the people. I think the most important thing is to have a good view of the screen if that's what we're going to use. If you don't want to, you want to change it around, then I think at least every manager should have a decent size screen in front of them that have the materials projected, because looking at a 45-degree angle to the side based on the quality of our projector, et cetera, is not ideal for trying to see the screen, especially if you would be moved closer to the screen and to the side. I experienced that for many years. So I think it would be, if you're going to do any movement, it'd be best to consider getting, laptops and screens. They're not that expensive. $800, you can get a good one, a decent one with a good camera. So that's the last of my comments on that.
Okay, do you have anything in your administrator report at all, Mr. Jeffrey?
President Pedersen, managers? Nope, we're good.
Thank you. Legal counsel.
Managers, just a brief report on the chloride legislation. I believe you received a communication from my colleague, Michael Welch, in collaboration with 3 other watershed districts. We've been working this session, getting interested parties together to try to get to some agreement about contents of a bill that could make its way through the legislature. The current chloride bills all were drafted with the landscape associations goals and positions, and that really would protect applicators even for gross or willful negligence. That's not acceptable to the other parties. They were proposing that the Landscape Association could certify salt applicators. The other parties believe that it should stay with the PCA. So with the organizations you see signing that letter and those principles, that the goal is to have new legislation introduced that would provide liability protection for just negligence, not gross negligence, would maintain certification of the salt applicators with the PCA, and would provide for that certification to be good for at least 3 years. So we'll keep our eyes on this, but I think this is kind of the part we wanted to do, which was try to get the parties together to agree on some principles that we thought most could agree to. I don't think we have the Landscape Association totally on board yet. So that's more to come.
I'm sorry.
But I just wanted to give you that status report.
President
Thank
Pedersen,
you. Yes.
managers, if I may follow up, and it leads somewhat to what Manager Cook was saying earlier, but when he was talking about it, one of the things that I don't know how it gets addressed is payment of winter service is on tonnage of salt. So as long as it's like that, they're motivated to put more salt down. So That's why the landscapers don't want to do it.
So comment on that. So the utility industry for a long time, that was a big issue to get people to conserve, to get the utilities to sell appliances that use less. But they figured out what the Public Utility Commission did was figure out ways to give incentives for that reduction. They call it negawatts, payments for negawatts, negative watts. So the utilities, their whole power structure was based on getting a big plant into the rate base charge, get everybody to fire up all electric devices. So that over time, we thought that that wasn't the best way, and we needed to conserve. We needed to entice people to conserve, and you couldn't get the utilities to go with it until you figured out a way to pay them for the, in essence, for the power that they couldn't put out in the lines anymore. But that was in the last 20, 30 years. But that may be changing now that the power consumption is going up, but not for the same reasons. Anyway, I just throw it out as an idea of figuring out a way to incentivize
That's,
the
Farm price support.
reduction of the salt.
thanks.
Okay, thank you. I believe we're on to upcoming board topics, which I believe we probably just have not had a chance to get too many of those on there yet. Yes. And I believe all of us can see the upcoming events that are listed there. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
To continue this meeting until March 26th.
Yes,
At 10 a.m.
thank you. You mean March 22nd?
Sorry, yes.
March 22nd, right? Tuesday,
6.
26th? And I have the wrong date?
Said 26.
Okay,
26th.
26, sorry about that.
Okay.
The 26th
10 a.m.
at 10 a.m.
Continue too.
Okay. So,
So I'll make that motion to continue this meeting.
Second?
thank
until-
you. Thank you, Manager Duval. And can we have a roll call vote, please?
Manager Crafton.
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook.
No.
Manager Ziegler.
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you all very much.